Prime Minister Netanyahu has authorized new construction of about 1,000 apartments in Jerusalem, and some say that that is an obstacle to peace. What do you say?
So I personally come politically from the labor,
Yes.
and I am very much a supporter of achieving peace by means of two states, a Jewish state and an Arab state. But I do believe even if you're against settlements or for the settlements, they're not at the core of the conflict. The settlements are not what's making peace impossible. The settlements are not what's preventing the possibility of the emergence of a Palestinian state. Actually, even Netanyahu has been one of the prime ministers to build the least in the settlements, and actually he has built on settlements that most Israelis consider consensus, that are abutting what's called the Green Line, that even if there were to be a Palestinian state, would be included in Israel. So he has not made a Palestinian state impossible. 47 years after Israel's controlling the West Bank, all the settlements take about 6% of the area. Much of it is on the Green Line, close to Israel. So two states are still very much a possibility. What is at the core of the conflict continues to be the denial of the idea that the Jewish people have a right, not a might, have a right to self-determination in their historic homeland. That right continues to be broadly denied and rejected by the Palestinians, by the Arab world more broadly, and that is at the core of the conflict. The core of the conflict is the inacceptance of a Jewish state, whatever size.
In light of the Gaza war last summer and also unity between Fatah and Hamas, how can you sit down and negotiate with someone who their goal is to destroy you?
So I would say that the word solution has lost some of its allure over the last few years. And people are coming to the realization that as much as they want peace, our goals are incompatible. We want to exist. We want a sovereign state. We believe that the Jewish people should have a state, small or large, but they should have a sovereign state. And broadly speaking, the Arab world rejects that. So there is an understanding that our non-existence is not something to be negotiated. But that is the desired outcome on the other side. So I think we need to forgo of ideas such as negotiating a solution. Right now, I wouldn't say that's in the cards. It doesn't mean that we cannot find ways to live side by side in security, in dignity, and finding forms where each find their own national self-expression. But achieving peace right now, when the price of peace for the Arabs is to recognize for all time and for good that the Jewish people will have their own state living there side by side, up until now, this is a price that they're not willing to pay. We need in many ways to recognize that and to just find other ways to wake up each morning alive.
The recent assassination attempt against Rabbi Glick once again draws attention to the problem of the Temple Mount. Should Jews be allowed to pray there?
So if you want to speak in terms of rights, of course, everyone should be allowed to pray. It should belong to everyone. It is holy to everyone. It is certainly holy to the Jews. This is the site of their original temple. The Jews in general, we should know, have a double relationship towards the Temple Mount. Some want to pray there, and some believe that it's so holy that they should not pray there. But I think it should be up to the Jews themselves to decide whether they pray there or not. So in terms of speaking as what the situation should be, of course, there should be mutual respect of the fact that this is a holy place for all. The problem is that presently, any Jewish assertion of those rights is immediately used to incite passions across the Arab world, across the Muslim world. They view it almost as infidel presence on what they view as their exclusive territory.
Desecrating their mosque,
yes,
their site.
And of course, there's no desecration happening, and Jews are not even entering the mosques and coming nowhere near that, but generally being in the area is unacceptable. This is literally a very explosive area. So we should find a way to walk a fine line between what should be the situation, which is, of course, everyone should be allowed to be there and pray, and being pragmatic and wise about managing a very explosive situation.
Well, how do you prevent this from getting out of hand? I mean, last time it led to the second intifada, did it not?
Yes.
So, I mean, it could become very explosive.
It could, and things could get out of hand, even though there is no real interest right now on behalf of the sides in a new round of violence. I think, especially on the Palestinian side, they have realized that violence has failed them. The second intifada, which included attacks, bloody suicide attacks, indiscriminate attacks against civilians in cafes and buses, did not rally people to their cause. So they know that it does not serve them. So we need to make sure that things do not get out of hand. The Prime Minister, for now, has closed the Temple Mount to all Jews, Arabs, Muslims, Christians, visitors.
Was that a wise move?
Yes. Basically, the desire is right now to calm tensions, kind of get everyone trying to make sure that elements of friction are lessened, so have people basically not be in the vicinity of each other. And there is a desire to pull back. Because there's a desire to pull back, I do have hope that this will not turn into a larger explosion of violence.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry recently implied that Israel's lack of willingness to make concessions with the Palestinians is helping ISIS recruit new fighters. What do you think?
I thought it was an unfortunate statement, and I think it does not, the statement does not appreciate the extent to which the Islamic State and people across the Arab world and in Islamist circles think that the entire existence of the State of Israel is an affront and humiliation to the Arab world. It's not about peace. It's not about the existence of a Palestinian state. It's not even about the settlements. It's about the fact that a Jewish sovereign existence, a powerful Jewish sovereign existence, is allowed to continue in the midst of what they consider their own Muslim holy lands, entrusted to them, and no infidels or Jews should be allowed to govern them. And this is the humiliation, and that I acknowledge. The Arabs and the Muslims broadly see that as a humiliation to them. But that's not about Israel making concessions. And I think we don't even know the full story of how far the Israeli Prime Minister was willing to go for peace. But I think we need to understand, still at the core of the conflict is the denial of the right of the Jewish state to exist. So every time there's an opportunity for the Arabs, for the Palestinians to say, look, you can have a 23rd Arab state, a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. The price of it is for all times, finally and for good, you recognize the right of the Jewish people to have their own sovereign state side by side with you. Until now, the choice has been to say no and not to pay the price, because the very existence of the Jewish state is the humiliation.
Well, and you talk about humiliation. I know that your prime minister was recently humiliated when it leaked out that members of the Obama administration had a number of not so flattering names for him. How did that affect U.S. relations?
I can assure you that Israelis do not appreciate that. Even Israelis who do not support the prime minister do not appreciate name calling of their elected prime minister. It's a democracy. It's not a dictatorship, so he is our elected prime minister, and we do not view it favorably when he's called names. I think it was uncalled for. I also think that it was a foreign policy mistake. Why say that Israel is not ready to carry out a military attack against Iran when this has been such a critical element in building the negotiating power of the West against Iran? Why dismantle yourself of such a powerful position? So I think it has been uncalled for, unhelpful, and I really don't see any reason for that.
There's a late November deadline for agreement with Iran on their nuclear program. What type of negotiation or final solution would be acceptable to Israel?
From the Israeli perspective, Israel made it very clear that anything that enables Iran to be close to the bomb, to be at a very short time range to break out, is unacceptable.
So they could continue their nuclear program? Israel would be okay with that?
No, Israel talked about a limited nuclear program for civilian and purposes that would be highly under very kind of specific monitoring, but no enrichment to levels that could only be explained by a nuclear weapons program, and this is what has to stop.
So if we end up with an agreement that allows them to continue for civilian purposes, but low levels of enrichment, that would be acceptable, I think.
Again, I'm not expressing the official Israeli position, but the official Israeli position, as expressed, said that enrichment that is for medical, civilian purposes and highly monitored could continue, but any enrichment that is necessary and goes beyond that and could be used for a weapons program is entirely unacceptable.
You've been in politics for a long time in Israel. You're well connected with the leaders there. Do you think that's going to happen? I mean, do you have reason for optimism?
Let me put it this way. I think right now, for an unexplained reason, the West is underplaying its hand. The Iranians are master negotiators. They're able to present to the West an image that they're not under any stress, that they're negotiating from a position of strength. They're even able to sell to the West that the West needs Iran to fight the Islamic State, whereas it's exactly the opposite. Iran needs the West to fight the Islamic State. But somehow they've been able to sell the West exactly the opposite and to somehow convince that this is why they should go easy on them. The Iranian regime is under pressure. It needs the sanctions lifted badly, and it's willing to go a long way in order to lift the sanctions. But it's keeping a very suave demeanor of not being under pressure. The West is either falling for that or wanting to fall for that, and there's no need for that. They're completely underplaying their hand, and they're in an excellent negotiating position.
What are your thoughts about the recent crackdown by Egypt in Gaza against extremists there?
The threat that we're seeing in the Sinai is, again, a threat not just to Egypt, it's a threat to the entire region. It's become an area of lawlessness where a lot of jihadi groups are able to prosper, to generate also a lot of resources for themselves. With the connection with the Gaza Strip and Hamas, they're able to bring in weapons, use weapons, fight the Egyptian regime. So certainly we appreciate any crackdown on extremist elements which have a very specific program for the region, and it certainly does not include the existence of Israel.
Well, I mean, a little nervous maybe? Israel a little nervous seeing military forces from Egypt move into the Sinai? I guess that's against the UN agreement.
But it is coordinated,
Yeah.
and it is with the understanding that it serves a common purpose and that it is not permanent.
Might there be cooperation between Egypt and Israel in the Sinai?
I think it is best for Egypt to do that. Israel is making sure that this does not enter our borders. There have been efforts from the Sinai to provoke Israel into action. The Israeli Defense Forces and the Israeli government have been very prudent in responding to these provocations in a manner that does not engulf the area in a greater violence and greater battle. But at the moment, it is up to the Egyptian regime to challenge and to deal with their own problems in the Sinai, and we will make sure that it goes no further.
Terrorists are constructing tunnels once again from Gaza into Israel. We saw recently tunnels being constructed from South Lebanon into Israel. What can Israel do?
First of all, when we look at Gaza, I think as people began to talk about reconstruction of Gaza and bringing in cement and rebuilding houses, What often went unnoticed that 80% of the people living in Gaza are registered as refugees from Palestine by the UN agency, UNRWA, especially created to politically perpetuate the Palestinian refugee situation. So if 80% of the people there don't even consider it their home, they consider what is today the state of Israel their home. They want to supersede it. They want to so-called return to it. So if you give them cement, why will they not build a tunnel? Because they don't want to build their houses. This is not their home. They want to build a tunnel that will take them to where they think their real home is, which is the state of Israel. So we need to understand that fundamentally there are forces that continue to see Israel as a non-legitimate existence in the region, and they will fight whichever way they can. So if armies are defeated, they go to terrorism. If terrorism is defeated, they go with rockets. If we find something against rockets, they build tunnels. And if all that fails, they go to the United Nations and go on a diplomatic attack, and they go to the media and to the social networks to turn Israel into an evil pariah state that should not exist. But this is an ongoing battle. This has been our reality in our existence. And in many ways, the beauty of Israel, the challenge of Israel, was our ability to maintain a thriving, modern, open, liberal society, while at the same time being at war and defending ourselves.
What should Americans do at this time?
Support Israel, be friends to Israel, fight against all those who, in the name of supposedly just criticizing Israel and Israeli policies, are making Israel to be the world's most evil country. That is a dangerous, dangerous process. And ultimately, I would say stand up for American values, because the more the world has of those, the safer the world is for Israel.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.